Chapter 1 where man is created.
And yeah, that Genesis.
So we'll look at that real quick, right? In Genesis 1, he's talking about all of creation.
Right,
And this is the sixth day.
right. And he says,
So it says in verse 26, God says, let us make
man, in our image.
after
Genesis
our
1.
likeness.
Genesis 1 and 26, y'all.
Y'all can hear me, right? Okay. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle,
And
and over
every
the earth, and over every
creeping
creeping
thing that
thing.
creeping upon the earth.
So God created man in his own image.
Right.
In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them.
Yeah.
And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth.
Yeah.
And I'll stop right there for right now. So basically what we see here is that the Most High has made man, he made woman,
Yep.
and he gave them dominion over the rest of the creation that we just read about them reading from verses 1 to 25.
Right.
Right? So he set them above the rest. Right?
Yeah.
So, but what's interesting is we're going to get to chapter 2. Okay? We're going to start at, hold on, I just had it. We're going to start at verse 4. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth, and they were created in the day that the Most High made the earth and the heavens.
Yeah, verse
And every
4.
plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field grew before it grew. For the Most High had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Now it's interesting to me.
Yeah, that
Alright.
it did.
It caught you too?
Yeah.
Because we just read that he made man.
He made man.
We read here that there was no man upon the earth. So what we have here is an overlapping of time between chapters 1 and chapter 2 already.
Yeah.
So that means the verses we just read in chapter 2 were before verses 27 in chapter 1. Just before he made man. Okay? We're going to continue. Chapter 2, verse 6. Sorry, verse 7.
Verse 7.
So verse 7 says,
And
and God formed the man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul. So now we've caught up with, so now chapter 2 verse 7 and chapter 1 verse 27 are at the same time. This is the same time it's talking about.
Yeah.
All right? So this man in verse 7 and the man in chapter 1 verse 27, that's the same man, all right?
Okay.
Because they were both created.
Okay.
Just a retelling of it in chapter 2 with contextualized detail. Because verse 8 goes on to talk about him having a garden planted,
Right.
where he put the man who he had made.
Right.
Right? So then verse 9, out of the ground, the Most High made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food.
Yeah.
And he put the tree of life there also in the midst of that garden. And he also put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah. Okay.
And talks about the rivers, the 4 rivers.
Right.
So we're going to go down to verse 16. Because this is when he's talking to that same man that he put to the garden. It says, and God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you cannot eat of it. All right? So this same man who he created and told to have dominion over all his creation, you get that from chapter 1. The same man who couldn't go to eat of all the fruit of the garden except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We get that from chapter 2. All right? And then he says it's not good for a man to be alone. I will make a helpmate for him. And out of the ground, the field, every fowl in the air, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatsoever the man called every living creature, that was the name thereof. And the man gave names to all cattle, and to every beast of the field. But for the man there was not found help meet for him.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Right.
So now, again, we go back to chapter 1.
Okay.
Because we see here, in verse 27, it says, God created man
In his own image, in the image of God created he him.
God created him. All right.
Okay.
That's the first part of chapter.
But then he said male and female. Okay.
Right.
Male and female.
But we're going to get to that.
Okay.
Because right now, he's talking about he's going to make a help me.
Yeah.
That's why there's a separation in verse 27. At first saying God created him.
Right.
And then he said he created them.
Right.
Because it's passing time.
Right.
Y'all follow me? So in verse 21 of chapter 2, he says, he caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man,
Uh-huh.
and he slept.
What verse we at?
This is chapter 2, verse 21.
Verse 21. Okay.
No, my mom doesn't say Adam. It says Adam.
Yeah. Yep.
Hold on. I know I'm sure about the other Bible. Let me get yours real quick.
Okay.
Let me get yours.
You bought the seat.
I did.
That's why I ain't bring mine. I just put the rock on
Take
the
that. That's all right.
That's the misinterpretation.
The misinterpretation. I would agree because the name of Adam, what does it mean? It means of the earth or something, of dust, something like that. Right? Because all names have meaning in scripture.
Yeah.
Hold on. I need to recontextualize myself real quick. So 27 says he made man.
Another translation says it is like
Yeah. It's different translation. You got what does Adam?
21?
No, what does it mean?
There we go. Because Adam is the first time his name is mentioned. Verse 21, right? That's good. That's what I was looking for. I forgot that myself didn't have that his name. Since Adam
It means
means
man or
essentially the same thing.
human.
But the point I was getting at, which I'm glad that you stopped me to say that, was that Adam is the same man that's being talked about in chapter 1, that's in chapter 2.
Yeah.
It's the same person, right? And I think people sometimes feel like it's talking about different people,
Yeah.
but it's not. As we just saw with the declaration of the times, because remember at the beginning of chapter 2, it said that there was no man on the earth. But at the end of chapter 1, it said that there was man. So wisdom dictates that the beginning of chapter 2 has to take place before the end of chapter 1, Noah's chapter 2. You know what I'm saying? It's just the way the story is being told.
Okay.
so basically in a nutshell. They tell me what God had what the demon already done. So if you go to chapter 2, it's basically kind of like a preview of this what happened. He already made man in his image, but now I'm telling you how man came about as I made him.
Right.
I got him. He was already created, but I'm gonna tell you how we
The
was made.
specifics of exactly, because what happens a lot of times in scripture, and you'll see it all over. They'll have chapters of summation, and it's just a large summary. For example, Genesis chapter 10 is one of those chapters. It's just a summary, but then the next chapter or the following chapters will break down that summary. And so that's what chapter 2 is doing for the man creation account of chapter 1. It's breaking it down with the detail.
Yeah.
So like we say, Adam was without a helpmate. He was the only one, the only created being without
a helpmate.
You know what I'm saying? All the other creatures had mates.
Yeah.
He did not. And we know that again in chapter 1, it starts by saying God created he him. And then there's a colon, and then it said he created them. So that has some time. We're now getting to that he created them part because he put Adam to sleep, took one of his ribs, and from that rib.
So break it down. So one is just giving like an overall of what happened in the beginning, but 2 do more of a breakdown of it's almost like it's like it's supposed to. It's like one gave you the story, but 2 gave you the breakdown
Yeah,
of the
it's
story.
the details.
Yeah, of the detail. Because
Chapter
1
is
didn't give the
summation.
detail, but 2 gave the detail. 1 gave the foundation. 1 is like foundational. 2 is like detail in that foundation per se.
I was just hearing, I just thought you were always saying that chapter 2 came before chapter 1. And I said that's impossible because the world was created first and then he created man. So
Yeah.
that's what you're saying, right?
Yes. No, I'm not
Okay,
saying
you
that
just-
chapter 2 came first.
Oh, okay.
I'm
I'm
saying-
like, what happened? Okay.
Yeah.
I
That's
was
why I
saying
was
that
sure.
chapter 1 is a summation.
Yeah.
But chapter 2 has details about
About
that
everything
summation.
that's happened. It's, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the storytelling. 3 little pigs. They're breaking it all down. Breaking it all down. I was making sure I'm understanding. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, that's good.
All right. Yeah, the woman being made, right? So he put Adam to sleep. It says he took one of his ribs. This is verse 21 still, of chapter 2. And closed up the flesh and stood thereof. It says, and the rib which the Most High had taken from man, he made woman,
Yeah.
and brought her unto the man.
Yeah.
So that's verse 22 of chapter 2. But that coincides now with the latter part of verse 27 of chapter
Yeah.
1. Male and female created in them. So now we're caught up.
Okay.
All right?
Okay.
Okay. And so now that we're caught up, it then goes on to end chapter 2. And
Okay.
then we continue with chapter 3, which is the beginning of the after creation
Okay.
story as there already been
Yeah.
in the earth.
Yeah.
All right, so time has passed between the woman being created and the serpent showing up in the scene. All right?
Okay.
They've been together for some time. And so it's also reasonable to assume that they've already been procreated by
Right.
this time as well. Because I think people tend to assume that Cain and Abel were their first children. I don't think that.
Okay.
It's just their story account was what was recorded.
Yeah.
But there were other children in the earth.
Think about it this way. They already was doing it because it's by nature, but they never knew what it was. Once they ate the apple and not found out the apple of the knowledge of good and evil, then they could, how can I say this? They can pinpoint what they're doing. Because remember, they were made in it was just natural.
So you're saying it was instant.
It was instant.
Conceptualization.
Right, because you never knew what it was. And then when you knew what it was this is what it was doing. This is why we're doing this. Because when you read further on, he talks about Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Okay.
But those are the only two. But remember, they had to procreate biologically. The animals did the same thing. So they did as natural. You didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
It was just a regular instinct. We just make it on instinct. But then when you now know what it is, I now can say this is such, this is that, this is that. Because now I now know what it is. Because I ate that food. That's just my opinion. I just,
No, that's good. That's good for thought, though.
Okay. Okay.
Because that goes to the question of what all changed when they ate the fruit, right? That's good to think about.
because right after the fruit, that's when they had.
Yeah, I'm
When they
reading
were
through.
driven out of the garden. Let me see. So, hold on. Chapter 4 starts off like this. Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain,
Okay.
and said, I have gotten a man from the Most High.
Okay.
So y'all remember earlier when I said names have meanings.
Right.
The fact that she named him, I have gotten a man from the Most High.
Yeah.
I wonder if Cain may have been her first husband. I could have been mistaken about my statement that they had children before them.
Yeah.
I knew that Adam and Eve had more than just Cain and Abel, though. That's what I was trying to make. They had more than just Cain and Abel. And
Wow.
by the time that Seth shows up on the scene, I'm pretty sure they had sons and daughters in between him too. because I think the way we tend to think about it is that at this time there was only Adam and Eve.
You're right.
Then there was Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel.
Right.
And then Cain killed Abel.
Yeah.
And then there was Seth. And then it's like, well, where the rest of the people at?
Exactly.
But wisdom would dictate that they had to have more children. I mean, he lived 900-something years.
Exactly.
So he had other kids. Now the pressure becomes who was procreating with who. Right?
Exactly.
That's where the pressure comes.
Yes.
And so now my question to you is, Curtis, because you said that there was other people besides.
It had to be, or are we saying it wasn't?
No, my question, because you're saying there is. So my question is, where did they come from? Because in order for them to be man, they would have had to come from Adam. And we just read that when they had Cain, she named him, I have gotten a man.
So in the beginning, God created Adam and Eve with Adam, and then Eve came from the rib, and that was it. And then they had 2 kids, and then
they had 2 kids in chapter 4. They had other kids afterwards. What I'm saying.
So they had more kids. So it wasn't no more.
Well, then once the woman came on the scene, it's now plural. So he created him singular, Adam, and then we created Eve. He created
Wow.
Well, it could be her.
Because see, now it brings back to the reason, it goes back to the spirits that more, because you know when you call them, those are the spirits, those are the other demonic spirits that are there. Yeah, the Legion, basically. The Legion? Yeah, the Legion of Demons. If I'm saying it like I'm
Well, no, I think I get what you're saying. Because we're talking about a group.
Yeah.
You say them. But that's in particular. I can say, I could be talking about Mr. Curtis and Miss Chrissy, and I can say, I saw them, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's vernacular.
Okay.
In that case. Alright.
Okay. So it's Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel,
and other sons and daughters.
the other sons and
Other
daughters.
sons and daughters.
So was the population was created from all those sons and daughters? Is that what it's saying?
That's what we have to infer. Because there's no other account of a separate type of being than men.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
where Enoch come from?
Enoch is of the line of Seth. So it'd be Adam, Seth, Methuselah. Not Methuselah. Hold on. I can find it.
So that means everybody, brothers and
Enoch is
sisters.
one of the great grandsons of Adam. Yeah, that's what it was.
And of course, blood, dilutes, you start getting further and further down the line. It starts separating.
Exactly. And so we can also infer from the scripture that when they were joined together, they would separate and move somewhere else.
Right.
So as they would increase in populations, then more variation would be able to forth.
Exactly.
Because when Cain was cast out for killing Abel, he was sent to be a vagabond. It said that he took his woman and they went elsewhere.
Took his woman.
Yeah. But it doesn't. I don't think it named her. They just said he took her. And
So the woman was a sister.
she would have had to be out or these guys.
Wow.
But at this time, that seems like that would have been the only logical way for population increase.
Wow.
Because we only have an account of one man and one woman being created.
Yeah, and then they kids.
And then their kids. So
I guess they right.
if there was another people,
Yep, a group of people.
where is it being mentioned? That's why when you
Right, because it's not in it, yeah. Wow. That's great.
I can also say though, that Adam wasn't procreating with his daughters. That wasn't happening.
Adam wasn't procreating with his daughters.
He was not
He wasn't procreating with his daughter.
And the reason we know that is because later in Genesis, when it talks about Lot and what happened with his daughters,
Yeah.
Scripture explicitly states that nothing like that had ever happened before in the generations of men.
Right.
So we know that Adam wasn't with his daughters.
Yeah.
The question is, who's Cain's wife? Because she bears Enoch.
That's crazy.
That's a different Enoch than what you're thinking of. His name is Enoch, but it's not the same Enoch you're thinking of. Yeah. The Enoch you're thinking of is the son of Seth. Right. Chapter 4, verse 7 is, you said chapter 4, verse 7? 17. Son named Enoch, and he named a city named Enoch. But the Enoch that you're thinking of, hold on, I'll tell you. I'm gonna find it for you. It's gonna tell us the generations. Right here. So this is chapter 5. This is the genealogy of the patriarchs until Noah. Right? And so it goes Adam, and then Seth, and from Seth we have Enos, and then we have Canaan, and then from Canaan we have Mahalalel. Mahalalel begat Jared begat Enoch. And that's the Enoch that you're thinking of, the one that was walking with God and was not. And then Enoch had Methuselah had Lamech, that's Noah's father, and Lamech had Noah. And then Noah had Shem, Ham, and Japheth, which were all three of all the other sons after the flood.
Okay.
Which goes to show again, because once he reset the earth with the flood, the only people that were left were 8 of them.
Yeah.
It was Noah,
That Noah, his wife.
3 sons, and their 3 wives. And they repopulated the earth. Now it's a little bit more genetic variety between that group of people and this group of people.
Right.
And so the question, I guess, comes up is, if technically they were given incestuous, why wasn't there many defects and deforms and stuff like that?
Right.
And I believe that was because, one, they were purer, given that they were closer to the beginning, and it hadn't been as much time that sin has been in the world and corrupting the world.
Interesting.
Because remember, corruption was happening over time. They started living less, stuff started being less healthy over
Yeah.
time. Right? Earth was dying over time. But also, once the Israelites came on the scene, when God gave Torah, He made laws specifically saying, don't do certain things, like incest. And now it's a precedent that's made in the spirit that those things have consequences. That's how I rationalize it.
Because the elephant in the room is basically like, it's like sin is incest is sin. You know what I mean? But then it's like, well, your God allowed it in the beginning. You know what I'm saying? So what makes it sin now? You know what I mean?
That was just because of Enoch.
Huh?
I think that's because of Enoch. Because once you know, I still believe once you know.
Yeah.
I told you, nah, don't do that. The reason why we had to do that is because we had to, do what we had to do instinctively. But now I'm telling you, don't do it. This is sinful. This is not. This is one of what I'm
But then my question would be, why? Because you could have created others.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Like, it's like, 'cause that puts us under the gun of people who are like atheists or people who don't like God and who don't like Christianity. Look at T, even T thinking, bro. I'm just saying, bro, like,
I'm thinking about the laws now
yeah.
and the specifics of them. That's what it is. You're not lying with your mother or your father or your sister or your brother
Yeah.
or your grandchildren. What what is it? Do not take another person's wife, do not take another person's husband. But we see in scripture all the time that they made cousins, that they made nieces and nephews. You know what I mean?
That's true.
All the time.
That's true.
Whatchamacallit? Jacob's wife was actually his cousin because his mama sent him Laban, which was her brother.
Right.
And Rachel was his daughter. So they were kin. They were kin.
That's crazy.
But that happened after the law.
That was before the law, but even after the law, you still have people who were, because you gotta remember, they were married within their tribe.
You saw the consequences of what happened. Most of the people that did that after the law were consequences. Am I wrong?
It depends on which law that was based on, because the point I was getting at was that some stuff is unlawful. You know?
Yeah.
Out of all I mentioned, I don't think we're anything about that convention. I can try to find
It's crazy work right here, bro. That's crazy.
Let me see if I can research it real quick. I got you.
Yeah.